Welcome to Business Review, a daily program that delves into the latest and most significant economic stories. From stock markets to currency news, Business Review covers the most up-to-date stories in the global financial world.
As soon as coronavirus regulations had been eased and domestic consumption ticked up, a recent French study evaluated the French market in the past 30 days and noticed an increase of 3 trillion euros for the first time since February 2020. This good news comes after opening the country in mid-May. The research indicated that manufacturing products and services sectors jumped to 51.3% in June from 32% in February, which means a total increase of 50% in over a few months. France appears to be primary and leading the way in progress. French President Emmanuel Macron stated that no French enterprise or company whatsoever its dimension would be permitted to collapse since the pandemic. The French administration paid up 521 billion to assist its economic system recover. The French finance minister, Bruno Le Maire, explained also to French media that the fight against the COVID-19 impact on economy is far from over.
Moi, je crois que l'essentiel, c'est d'inciter.
I think the importance is that companies should return to work. And what we have worked on for the past few weeks in terms of financial aid to those companies is to be able to create a certain equilibrium to move our workforce forward. One of our reform is to reevaluate the unemployment scheme.
The initial PMI for the countries that use the euro surged up to 48% in growth in June after a low history of only 13% in April. EU's GDP is still enduring a steep decline in the next quarter, right after the deepest contraction this year. France pledged 17 billion euro to keep Europe in the aerospace race.
Pour l'évolution, après, c'est au ralenti quand même.
Growth has been slow. Our job did not immediately stop. That's how things work. And inability to respect health regulations because it is hard to adapt in our construction sites.
La politique du gouvernement a été la bonne.
The French president has done a great job with his financial aid project and hopefully will continue to work without any interruption.
France's clear growth goes back to their health and medical investments, where the government is dedicated to supporting all aspects of the French country. President Macron said during a meeting with trade unions and employer unions in France that the French government presented an aid to save jobs as Macron welcomed trade union leaders to develop a new long-term partial unemployment scheme.
Many analysts predicted a drop in the GDP in Europe and particularly in France, but things are changing day after day. Luckily, France is moving in the right direction. This is Farah Al-Hashim reporting for the Business Review, KTV2, Paris.
The Dow and the broader US stock market tumbled Friday as investors grow increasingly worried about the economic outlook. Stocks sold off sharply to end the week as the Dow and the Nasdaq Composite recorded their worst day since June 11th. The Dow closed to 730 points or 2.8% lower. Only one Dow stock, Cisco, closed in the green. The Nasdaq Composite closed down 2.6%. The S&P 500, the broadest measure of Wall Street, fell 2.4%, yet it was the worst drop since only Wednesday. All three indexes recorded a weekly loss. Meanwhile, the 10-year Treasury note yield fell about 4 basis points to 0.647% amid inflows into safe haven assets. In global equities, the Stoxx Europe 600 index fell 0.4% to close at 350.32 points, and London's FTSE 100 UKX closed up 0.2%. In Asian markets, the Japanese Nikkei gained 1.1%, Hong Kong's Hang Seng lost 0.9%, while South Korea's Kospi advanced 1.1%. Markets in China were closed for a holiday.
Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday, the 22nd of June, met with the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, and President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, via video link. The Chinese President said that since the COVID-19 outbreak, China and the European Union have supported and helped each other, noting that China is willing to join hands with the European side to push for a more stable and mature relationship in the post-pandemic era. Xi stressed that China and the EU should serve as two huge markets that promote global development and prosperity, adding that the two major economies should play the role as dual engines of the world economy, drive the recovery of the global economy, jointly support a scientific and orderly resumption of work and production, strengthen macroeconomic policy coordination, and keep global industrial and supply chains stable and smooth. The two EU leaders said that the relationship between the EU and China is full of vitality, stressing that only through cooperation can the world cope with global challenges, and only dialogue and consultation can eliminate regional instability.
France and Germany on Monday, June 22nd, pressed for an agreement among European Union leaders on the size and payout details of a joint fund aimed at helping the hardest hit member states to recover more quickly from the coronavirus pandemic. German Finance Minister Olaf Scholz and French counterpart Bruno Le Maire said they were confident that a deal on the European Recovery Fund could be reached soon, ideally at an EU summit next month. Le Maire said Germany and France both agreed that the European Recovery Fund should pay out the proposed funds of at least 500 billion euros from 2020 until 2022, and not until 2024 as suggested by some member states. The two sides also discussed how to rescue stalled negotiations on global corporate taxation and international tax rules for big digital companies. Nearly 140 countries are involved in the talks, organized by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, on the first major rewrite of global tax rules in a generation to bring them up to date for the digital era.
The German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas on Monday, June the 22nd, promised Italy support for its economic recovery when Berlin takes over the rotating European Council presidency in July. Speaking after meeting his Italian counterpart in Rome, Maas said that the most urgent task for Germany's presidency was an economic and social restart for Europe, stressing that no country could be left behind. EU leaders remain divided on how to structure a proposed COVID-19 recovery fund for European economies. The head of the European Commission said that on Friday, June the 19th, with the balance of loans and grants still to be agreed. The COVID-19 outbreak, first confirmed on February 21st, has killed more than 34,600 Italians, putting it among countries hardest hit by the pandemic. The Treasury estimates the economy will contract by at least 8% this year due to lockdown measures.
The COVID-19 pandemic has crippled air travel, leading to an unprecedented number of flight cancellations globally as nations across the world began enforcing strict lockdown measures. Data showed that by April, international seat capacity had dropped by almost 80%. From a year ago and a half, the world's airplanes were in storage, suggesting the aviation industry may take years to recover from the pandemic. In May, industry trade group Airlines for America said U.S. airlines were collectively burning more than $10 billion in cash a month and averaging fewer than 24 passengers per domestic flight because of the coronavirus pandemic. U.S. plane maker Boeing said it handed over just 4 planes in May, down from the 6 it delivered in April, its lowest total for the month in 6 decades, and about 87% fewer than it delivered at the same time a year ago. Meanwhile, plane maker Airbus was reported to have told its senior staff that the company must be resized in plans to be set out around the end of June. In late May, Chile's LATAM Airlines Group SA became one of the largest carriers so far to seek an emergency reorganization during the pandemic, while Britain's EasyJet said it planned to cut up to 4,500 jobs and shrink its fleet to adjust to the smaller travel market. Virgin Australia said on May 22nd it had been granted formal recognition of its voluntary administration process in Australia and was put up for sale. Ethiopian Airlines converted 22 of its passenger planes to cargo planes in a bid to help the company diversify.
Business Review, your daily source for the most critical stories in the financial world. Tune in next time for the latest financial news impacting the world economy.